Hey everyone, welcome to Founders 365 with me, Steven Haggerty. Today I'm joined by the founder of Inspired Edinburgh, Mr. Elliot Reeves. How are you today, Elliot?
I'm great, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me on your show. We've tried this
Thank
a few times.
I
We've
know.
got here in the end.
I think this is third time to try it. To third
Third time
time the
lucky.
charm. Yeah.
That's it.
So thank you for being here, dude. I appreciate
That's
it.
a pleasure.
I've watched a couple of your interviews. I love your style, so I'm looking forward to this one. And to be honest, possibly out of 209 interviews, the best backdrop we've had. Just putting that out there.
That's not a green screen, I'll tell you that as well.
You say that, but what happens now is like your cat walks behind you and knocks it down, and you're like, "Oh no, it was a green screen." But no, it is not a green screen. So Elliot, let's just get the ball rolling as always, and get a little bit of information from you about what Inspired Edinburgh is. First and foremost, stupid question, but where are you based?
Believe it or not, you'd never know from the title.
Never know.
Scotland's capital, city of Edinburgh.
I love Edinburgh.
Is an amazing city.
Yeah, I had a stag there 2 years ago now. Actually, I think maybe
Right.
last year.
Okay. Yeah.
For my 3-4 drunken days there, I absolutely love it.
Where did you go?
Great question. This is already off topic, which I love, but we went to this. I think it was this Irish bar mainly every night. I think it was probably like a typical Irish name, like O'Mulligan's or whatever.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
a little square.
Sounds like Grass Market type area.
Yeah. And then we basically where all the bars and a couple of like crappy clubs are, and we basically just stayed there for 4 days.
Got
Didn't
you.
see anything else in Edinburgh.
Yeah,
But I still love it. I mean,
Yeah.
as we came in on the tram, I was like, "This is a beautiful city."
Yeah, it is. I would implore anyone that hasn't been to Edinburgh to visit it. It's awesome. It's awesome.
And so you run Inspired Edinburgh, which
Yeah.
actually, by the name of it, I guess you wouldn't guess what you do.
Yeah, that's probably actually. Yeah, I've never really thought about that.
Not in
But
a
yeah,
rude
you're
way.
right. No. But yeah, it's. Yeah, no, you make a good point there. I don't. I won't go too much into the origin story because I know we're going to cover that. But when I started it off originally, it was predominantly a video podcast. I don't really consider it a podcast because I think of it more as a television show that just happens to be online. But today I would refer to it as a video production and media company centered around a world-class online talk show and top 20 ranked UK philosophy podcast, because that's kind of what it's become, but that's not really how it it was intended to start. It's what it's become.
Which is lovely. For you, if we go back in time into those early days then, when you obviously thought, I want to produce videos, I want to share stories, what was going on in your world that you thought, actually, this is the time for me to do this, and this is the medium or the means of me doing that?
Mm-hmm. I think it sort of dovetailed on two things. And to be honest, they were probably just human emotions. I mean, one of them was definitely frustration, and the other one was inspiration. And so
two emotions that actually go hand in hand, really.
Well, yeah. Strangely, yeah, it's a sort of duality of, where
if
we
you're frustrated,
can
you're
be.
probably going to get inspired about something.
That's it, exactly. So, I was working for a really, really good company. I was doing work that, in sort of relative terms, I quite enjoyed. I certainly enjoyed the people and the atmosphere and all that sort of stuff, but I felt as though there was limited scope for progression in my career. I was working in asset management, and just through a bizarre sort of sequence of events, I became interested in wanting to, I guess, find out about people, find out what drove them, their mindset, their attitudes, and sort of unpick the drivers for their success. Probably a lot like your own motivation for doing this, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And so, it was probably around, trying to think if I trace it back, I became interested in podcasts through Joe Rogan Experience back in probably 2011, 2012. And then London Real.
Those are that's the early days for Rogan as well.
Yeah, it was, though, because the conversations that he was having then were very kind of nichey and quite Yeah, yeah, quite
He
out
doesn't
there.
have Spotify with $100 million check over his shoulder.
He didn't
He could
then.
just.
That's
I think
absolutely for
I
sure.
remember watching the first couple of Joe Rogan's, like his very first ones, and the first
Hmm.
10, 15 minutes is him just trying to figure out the tech while smoking a joint.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how his consistency has got him to where
Yeah,
he is.
yeah. You seem to like that theme of consistency. Well, I'm sure we'll touch on that.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
I mean that's one of the big players in anything.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And so, it was Brian Rose of London Real that was a big sort of inspiration and kind of catalyst. I was
Currently
at
running for
work and I
mayor.
would say again. Yeah,
Currently
I
running for
know,
mayor.
right? I never would have seen that coming. Um, but yeah, power to him. I think what he's doing is pretty avant-garde. But yeah, no, he means well. I like Brian.
Yeah.
And so what he was doing got me on the path of wanting to do these episodes, these
Gotcha.
things. And to be honest, I was in a situation financially that I could afford to take the plunge and it not be kind of critical.
That's a
So
great point though, because a lot of people do things because they need it to earn an income, or they need something out of it. So you were obviously in the space where you weren't expecting anything in return, I'm guessing.
no, not really. Not certainly not immediately. It was a longer term plan. I
Yeah.
always knew that. Which that was luxurious in many ways. A lot of, because as you're saying, a lot of people they don't have that. It's either make or break from
Mm.
day dot. Whereas I knew that I had a bit of time to really, kind of figure out what it was that I was actually doing and where it was going to go. And I expected, I think, that the London Real template was something that I was going to kind of mirror. But as the sort of journey unfolded, I don't know, for whatever reason, I sort of felt kind of resistance, or that it just didn't quite sit right. And then
Resistance to what?
resistance to wanting to kind of build a platform and a tribe and do online courses and kind
Got
of,
you. Yeah.
you have to be, I think, a certain type of individual to want to do a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff. And I think that, if you can reconcile it with your reasons for wanting to do it a lot of the time, I just didn't have a strong enough desire to really
Yeah.
do that.
For me, because I've attempted that sort of online course, and that typical, I guess, Facebook ad marketer strategy,
Yeah.
and immediately it was just so unpassionate for me. I was just like, I do
Mhm.
not want to do that. I don't want to be that guy that like shares his Stripe account and he goes, oh my god, I've had 7,000 new students come through the system, let me teach you how. I think when you're coming from the space where you were obviously at, where you were actually you were enjoying the process, by the sounds of it, you were
Yes.
enjoying that, I guess, that discovery phase still as well, because
Hmm.
by the sounds of it, your background is fairly normal, in the sense where, great corporate job, you're probably pretty set, you could, if you wanted to, you could have carried on going down that path, and life probably would have been pretty sweet, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But now you're in that new path of discovering, oh, what do I want from life? What do I want from this? And giving yourself that leeway to be like, I'm just gonna have really great conversations with people
Hmm.
and see what happens.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, just to round off on what we were talking about there, I mean, when I was doing this was before the days of the term furu, like fake guru.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you've got guys now, channels on YouTube like Mike Winnett and CoffeeZilla, who are essentially just attacking the likes of your Dan Peñas, your Dan Lokes, your
yeah.
Brian Roses.
Just
Like that
tearing
wasn't a
everything
thing back
down.
then. That's a
Mm.
thing now. But yeah, you're right. When I started the conversations, the tagline for Inspired Edinburgh when I started it at first was reconnect with your purpose, because I was in that space of, I felt as though I had found a sense of purpose in my life by having these inspirational conversations. And really my mission for doing it was to inspire and what I would describe as elevate the consciousness of others. So rather than people operating in a space of kind of, fear or scarcity, moving to a space of uh, abundance,
Hmm.
and love, really. like higher frequency. I can get quite sort of spiritual. That's been a big part of my own personal evolution, is I guess a kind of a spiritual awakening. And I'm not talking about taking DMT and sitting in a forest. I'm just talking about just through personal growth and through lived experiences. That's been a big part of what I've been doing. So yeah. But,
and through that personal development, is that why you started the conversations with, I guess, fellow people, like you said?
Yeah, absolutely. Entirely for that reason. I mean, one conversation in particular that really caused, I would say, a fairly significant paradigm shift in me was Brian Rose's interview with Peter Sage, because the stuff that they were discussing was just unlike anything that I had heard people talk about. But, it's typically the sort of things that you would hear your Eckhart Tolle or Osho or Sadhguru, like these sort of spiritual masters.
Yeah.
And Peter was talking about this in a fairly bloke to bloke environment, and I was just like, whoa, it blew my mind entirely.
From that moment though, from that blowing your mind, how long did it take you for you to go, oh, actually maybe I can do something for myself, maybe I can start to develop this thing that obviously was in your mind somewhere, which perhaps you just didn't know about?
I mean, I tend to kind of back myself on stuff. I have pretty strong conviction that if I'm given enough time to figure something out, I'll figure it out, irrespective of the complexity of it. And that's maybe just kind of hubris.
But that's just Scottish, I think.
It's just
like,
Scottish.
we're just gonna do it. We're just gonna crack on.
But anything and everything that I've done so far, there hasn't been a blueprint for. I've just figured it out as I've done it. Like, I had no skills in video production. I had no skills in podcasting. I had no real sort of tech skills as such. Everything that I've done has just been through doing it, improving, and just recycling that process.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I think it sounds cheesy, but the best way to learn is to do. I think especially in the current climate, in terms of what information we have access to, we mentioned courses earlier. It's so easy to fall into that trap of just trying to go into education, like educating yourself. And I feel like a lot of people, when they go down that path, they kind of expect a certain moment to happen that they feel, or they're told, okay, you're ready for this now. Go off and do it.
Yeah.
And that moment never happens externally. It's always internally. It's always 100%. Yourself, whether that is after you've gone through courses and you've done training, or you sound very similar to me. I'm just like, hey, let me try it, because the worst I'm ever going to get is like a no. And from that no, I'm going to learn. That's as simple as that. I'm interested to know for you though, you mentioned that obviously this started off as just a video podcast, video interviews. When did it morph for you into something bigger, something, I guess, turning it into a business? When did that start thinking and start happening for you?
Probably when I realized people would pay me for the services that I was providing.
That old chestnut. People wanted to pay you for the thing that you were doing.
Yeah, which
Mate,
honestly,
I reckon there's a book in that.
Quite possibly. I honestly actually never sort of anticipated that. I expected that because I was having these amazing conversations, I'd be perceived as, a conversationalist. But actually, I think it's probably because somebody needed a service that they could see that I was providing, and it worked out that way. So
you must have had a small plan to make it, let's be honest, to make it money generating, because like you mentioned, you had a little bit of a window that you could explore in and not worry about income, but that window obviously all runs out unless you're a millionaire winner, that you're just keeping that quiet.
I'm not.
Just put that out there.
Yeah, you're right. No, there's always at the back of my mind, this has to become self-sustaining, or I have to do something with it. It can't purely, it's really interesting, man. Like, to go slightly off piste, I'm a big music fan, right? I love, actually, I'm a huge trance and dance fan. And so I was recently listening to some new stuff from a guy called Gareth Emery, who's an English DJ, music
I won't
producer.
pretend I know who he is.
His stuff's, for me, I think it's really, really good. And there was a remix of one of his tracks that was like one of the greatest songs I've ever heard. And it was by a guy who I was familiar with. His name is Jeremy Van Cowlart. And so I went on Instagram and decided to follow him. And so I went to this page, Jeremy Van Cowlart, and it was like a Canadian-based real estate sort of agent. And I was like, well, that's not the guy, obviously, because this
did
is
you
like
have a moment where you thought maybe it is, and he just does the music in his part?
No, I honestly was like, this is definitely isn't him. And so went in search, and then I went back. You know, actually, I think I went to like, I don't know who it would have been, like Armada Music, and it actually tagged him, the Canadian real estate guy. And I was like, wait a minute. So I went to his page and scrolled through, and then I could see like little album covers and stuff where he had done the music. And I was like, this is insane. Like, this is a guy that I perceived to be like a superstar DJ.
Wow.
Who actually by day is just like a real estate guy. And he had made a video on his Instagram page that's kind of speaking about music for him. And he says in the video, I've never made a penny from my music. He's got his own record label. He says he's never made up any money whatsoever from his music. It's an expression of art. It's his creative outlet, you know, which isn't to say that he wouldn't want to make money from it. He just, it's so difficult to actually do that. But he makes money from, a bit like myself, the sort of branching off things that are related to, because he's good at that, he can then do audio and tech for corporates, or he can coach people on how to create their own music and all this sort of stuff. So it's not the actual music itself that is the revenue, it's the things that he can do because he creates the music.
Got you.
And that's exactly, like that's essentially Inspired Edinburgh and me, you know, being a sort of youpreneur.
Yeah,
I've been able to monetize things because I've got what you would consider high income skills through the path that I've walked.
And for you, was that something tricky to come to terms with? Did you feel like, because a lot of people when they sort of start out, especially from that corporate background, they think, oh, I've got to make it so that this one thing I do makes the most amount of money. Or were you always sort of like, actually, I'm gonna explore this, I'm gonna see what happens, and from that, like you said, you never even had the video skills prior to learning them for yourself?
You know, I'm reluctant these days to ever give absolute answers to questions, because I know that, you know, as people, we change, we develop, and you know, I was probably less open to that in the past. I was probably more rigid in my views, whereas now I'm quite fluid. Mm-hmm. So money is not a massive driver for me, you know, like provided I can live a decent standard of life and do the things I want to do. I don't have aspirations to be a billionaire, because why would I want to be a billionaire? Usually it's to fill some void that, you know, you grew up in the slums when you were a child, and you're now trying to make up for it to feel as though you're not poor anymore. Like, I can't relate to that. So I guess to answer the question, like I'm okay with it. I'm like entirely okay with it.
Obviously, the personal development side of things was a huge factor for you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage that? How do you make sure that you're doing the right thing for you in terms of the development side of things?
I think you can tell, you know, in your body, in yourself.
Yeah.
There's probably sort of key indicators, but like your mental health, you know, or your physical and your well-being, you know, your spiritual well-being. Just checking in with yourself and being like, am I happy? You know, am I enjoying what I'm doing? And you know, without a doubt, it got to a place during sort of lockdown, and you know, I've been doing this for
2020 as a whole.
2020 has been a pretty sucky year, and you know, I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time, and it gets often to the point where it becomes challenging for me to do interviews with the caliber of guests that I want to have on the show. And you know, I did like 52 episodes year one, year two, it sort of diminished a little bit. Year three, it's diminished, and it's kind of gone down and down and down. And obviously, with the current situation, I've not been able to really do any interviews. I'm just put it on the back burner, and I'm kind of pivoting, if you like. And so I've started doing some consulting work and stuff, which I have to say I'm absolutely loving. That's ironically doing it with an asset management company. Because I've kind of paired the skills that I had
in a mysterious way.
It does. It's kind of full circle, and that happens in so many ways in life, I think.
You mentioned the checking in side, which fascinates me, because when I speak to people that have gone through huge personal growth, that checking in is like, it's just a behavior, isn't it? It's just, you know, when things are out of line, so you feel like you need to check in with yourself. For you, when you check in with yourself, do you remember, or actually, here's a better question. Do you remember that first time, or those first couple of times when you were like, actually, how am I feeling? How am I doing? What can I do to change things? In a conscious manner.
So you mean specifically to more recent times?
Because it sounds like there was obviously a shift recently or a couple of years
ago. No, there definitely was.
For you to move forward in that space.
I think that was probably a more logical conversation in my own head as to, you know, how it's a really good question. I guess, like, what are the challenges that I'm currently facing? You know, am I happy?
Yeah, it's such a big question, though, isn't it? That we throw. Yeah,
it is a big. Yeah, a lot of these questions you won't necessarily have immediate answers to.
Yeah,
I think you can generally tell as to whether you are living in alignment or not. You know, are things feeling like
saying that because you know how to do it? If I asked you that 5 years ago, would you know? Would that still be the same answer?
Let's talk through that a little bit. In what sense? So I generally,
So often when someone goes on a personal journey, so for example, I can take my own experience here. So I first discovered coaching 5 years ago, almost by mistake, and I distinctly remember the first time I was in a room with my the guy that I ended up doing all my training with. His name's Steve Payne, and I remember being in that room, absolutely mind blown in that clarity moment of, this is me, this is what I should be doing, this is exactly who I am. However, if 2 years before that, or a year before that, when I was running a recruitment company in London and going into my office that I rented and hated rented, and actually hated my own business walking into it, and like got into that space, I would never have asked myself, am I in that space? Like I just wouldn't have checked in with myself, because that whole realm of personal development was on my spectrum, but not on a connected level. Like my mother's a psychologist and things, so I always grew up with having the difference in questioning, but not on a, I guess, personal inner self, but always sort of an externally focused manner. So that's why I ask you, because a lot of people that have gone through personal development in that space where they go, actually, it did change my life, rather than, oh, you know, I just do a bit of personal development, like I read a self-help book on the train. I always say, like, okay, so when you weren't in this space, what was going on? Because actually, these questions are easy now, like, oh yeah, self-check, like, am I happy? Am I doing this? But actually, 5 years ago, you probably weren't asking yourself those questions.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Which is
you're absolutely right.
For me, which is always interesting, because then we can even go into that whole, like, that moment it all changed. You know, that moment you thought, actually, you're right. Ask myself those questions.
Yeah, well, but that's the trying to, what is it, the analogy, like trying to nail a square peg through a round hole.
Yeah.
You know, like you keep hitting your head off the wall and kind of swimming against the current without realizing that actually, like, why are you doing this?
Well, I think a lot of people think it's normal.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're probably right. I think a lot of people probably feel as though they don't have a choice in the matter either,
accept it.
because they feel as though they're a victim of their circumstances. without realizing that they're responsible for all of those things, and
Yeah.
that at any moment they could change them.
Or that whole like life is supposed to be hard.
That's a
Life,
horrible mindset.
it is, but you see it all the time. I remember there was this. I used to get the train into. I lived in Surrey at the time. I used to get train into Victoria, and on the way home in the evening, there was this woman every day. She'd get on, sit in the same seat, and crack open one of those mini bottles of wine every night without fail. And I always used to think, like, what is going on in her? What's going on in her day for her process to be like that? But then a big thing that I always got taught is like we all have our own map of the worlds, right? And if we try and change everyone's map of the world, it's going to be a horrible struggle for us and super frustrating.
Yeah.
But you always have to question. You always have to be like, okay, so what is that? Why are they doing that? And actually, some people are going to do it and they're going to enjoy doing it, and you kind of have to accept that that's okay in a manner because that's their life. But I think that the whole world of personal development is I love it. I mean, I think it's fantastic, but it's always interests me the beginning stages of it, because then there's so many different paths you can go on. You know, like you mentioned, you could end up in a forest doing what's that really famous drug, ayahuasca or whatever it is.
Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca,
Yeah.
You could end up doing that in a forest, and then really go into a new realm of possibilities. For you, since coming into the world, like since discovering personal development, how has it improved sort of just your outlook on life and the way you're doing what you're doing now? Because from the sounds of it, if you didn't go through that kind of self-awareness, you wouldn't be sat in an amazing studio talking to me. You know, the honor of doing that. Come on now. And
exactly.
and doing that, you probably would have maybe slipped back in, maybe did it for a couple of months and gone back into asset management.
Yeah. So personal development as a term is quite broad. I mean, so my development actually, with reference to this, I would consider more spiritual and emotional development, more specifically. And I think a lot of people think that, one day everything's kind of dark and murky, and then the next day everything's kind of light and butterflies. And it's not at all. It's like intense, it's brutally challenging. And you begin to question the fabric of every element of your life, is what I've found.
Yeah.
So I remember an interview a long time ago I did with two guys, John and Dre from Voices in the Dark podcast. And John, I can't remember what question I asked, who is John? And he was like, oh my God, every time I get asked that, I have like an existential crisis. And that didn't land with me at the time. I didn't quite understand that. But now I get that. I understand what it means to just start to be like, what is going on here? Like, who am I? Why am I on this, sand grain in infinite space floating about? Just doing stuff often for the sake, because somebody else said that I should do it, or just cultural conditioning and all these things. When you break everything down to like its most fundamental parts, that's quite scary. But I mean, like, current day me understands me and my reasons and my drivers far better than old me. You're right. I mean, like, so Tony Robbins has this model for the 6 human needs. So there's certainty, uncertainty, significance, love and connection, personal growth and contribution. And old me was driven massively by significance. So feeling as though I was like important and like had a good job title and business cards and lots of money and like a flash car and all this kind of stuff. Current day me has very little attachment to sort of material things and labels, and I just simply am what I am in any given moment, and sort of trying to adapt to the ever-changing environment that is this planet.
And I think the key is as well is to sort of be unquestionably that. Sort of just be like, I am who I am. That's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've distilled it down to having my own set of personal values.
Yeah.
So I've got an acronym CHAIR. So it's compassion, humility, authenticity. Oh, I can barely say it.
Char.
Compassion, humility, authenticity, integrity, and respect.
Yeah.
So if everything that I'm doing isn't tying back to them, I tend to know it.
Yeah.
And then it's either discarded or
earlier, though,
reevaluated.
like, it goes against that gut feeling that people have.
Exactly.
And it's only because you know your values that you know what that gut feeling means. Whereas if you don't figure out your values, or you don't figure out your own beliefs, because I always say, you know, if I said to you, Elliot, look, write 10 of your beliefs on the wall, typically 8 of those beliefs are what I would call like adopted beliefs.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't know, I'm scared of dogs. And it's probably you're not scared of dogs. It's probably that your parents were scared of dogs, and when you were a child, they pulled you away from dogs, so you were scared of dogs. And then 2 of those beliefs are the beliefs that you do realise where, through your own personal just life growth, you come to them. But it's only when we start to question these and figure it out for ourselves that we understand the you know, the gut feel. I don't know if you've heard of M-bit or M-braining, but that's where you understand sort of the head, heart, and gut brain. So we have 3. We actually have four brains or 5 brains, but the 3 main brains, head, heart, and gut. And it's all about how we actually can do a lot to work in alignment to them, rather than what typically happens where you're sort of pulled by one or pulled by the other, and you don't really understand sort of the gut feeling, or, you know, heart wrenching, all these sort of acronyms that come with it. Because I think it's and I always get this wrong, but it's either a heart or a gut that has the same amount of neurons than a cat's brain, which is crazy. So those feelings and those situations really mean something. But it's fascinating for me to just hear like your story and where you've come from and what you're doing, because for me it sounds like, and it looks like you're just like you've got it figured out, man. You've got it figured out in terms of who you are.
I don't know about I don't know about that. I mean,
you don't question it, you know. You're just like, yeah, this is my beliefs, this is my values.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so we touched upon it because you asked me before the conversation started. I had my car stolen in August.
Minute of silence, please.
You know, I mean, like I've.
But I think, wasn't it like a classic BMW or something? Like you liked the car.
Yeah, it was my pride and joy. I remember when I was 17 years old going into the BMW dealership, and there being this. It was a convertible BMW M3. Nice. That was in titanium silver with individual like purple colored leather, and I remember just seeing that, and I was just like, that is an unbelievable car. Like, one day I'll have one of them.
Purple colored leather.
It was super cool though. It was really, really nice. Honestly,
you're not selling it to me, but you'll be selling it to someone.
Yeah, trust me,
that
it was
explains
awesome.
The purple lights.
And so, well, I can change the color of them if you don't like them. And so, yeah, eventually I like got my dream car, silver grey BMW M3 convertible with a mola red leather, and I did various modifications to it cosmetically, you know, all sorts of stuff, and had the car for a number of years. And the thing is that the E46 M3, which originally production for them started in 2001 and ended in 2006, the value of them is now going up again because they're quite hard to get, you know, like good quality ones, and they're sought after. And my car, like, I really didn't use it all that much. I got it was used 16,000 miles, one female owner, when I got it back in, say, 2009, I think it was. And I had it totaled something like 46,000 miles, which is really low because a lot of them are creeping up to sort of 100 plus. And yeah, I mean, it was broken into, and then people who did that came back the next night and stole it. And that was a fairly excruciating experience because I had, you know, I like loved the car, but I was actually able to deal with it and get over it relatively quickly because of my newfound beliefs. And because honestly, I take kind of extreme ownership for it and accept that I have on some level manifested that situation to happen in order to open a door to whatever lies next. Yeah. So I've done that to myself for a greater reason to probably to improve myself, to get a better car in the future is kind of how I look at it.
And the thing is, if you really look at it, it's probably not even about the car. It's about the 17-year-old Elliot
It's
going
not
into the BMW garage and seeing that car and being like, "That I fall in love with that."
Yeah, I mean, it's a piece of metal at the end of the
Yeah.
day, you know. No,
The
and
problem is
nobody
never the
was hurt,
problem.
and it could, you know, it could have been far, far worse. And look, if I ultimately don't get a replacement, you know, it's just a car.
Yeah, it's but it's funny how these things. It's funny how it kind of comes back to that personal development moment, then, isn't it? Though, because before that, it did mean something, and it
Yeah,
still does mean something, but it doesn't mean as much as you perhaps thought it did. And it
yes,
only took that event for you to realize that, or for you to accept that, or that story to come about, which is again just an interesting way about how we perceive reality and perceive things. You know, I feel like we could talk for literally hours. I have absolutely
we will
loved
at
it.
some stage, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, we will. I think next year I want to do more like round table conversations, so
Oh,
which
that
will
would
be
be
like
cool.
2-3 hours, which I think will be
Oh,
amazing.
wow,
Yeah, and I would definitely get you involved in that. But
nice.
I guess my final question is how can people who have listened to this and sort of like your tone of your voice and they want to hear more of Elliot, how can they find out more about you? How can they follow you? How can they connect with you on whatever level they want to connect with you on?
That's quite deep.
You've got Tinder.
You won't find me there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like literally, Google Elliot Reeves or Inspired Edinburgh, and you'll find me easily enough. You know, at Elliot C Reeves across social media. I've got my own personal website. I've been working on it over the last few months. I probably actually will start to make changes to that, so that'll be to come. But Inspired Edinburgh, yeah, and across social media.
I love the
I'm
way that
really not.
working on it isn't the same as making changes to it.
What did I say?
You said, "Oh, I've been working on it for the last couple of months, and I'll probably make changes to it and start using it."
So what I mean by that is I started doing it and thinking that I would brand myself as something, but I think now I'll brand myself as something else. It's kind of it's gone on long enough that I've decided to change who I
just do
am.
Elliot Reeves, man.
Well,
It's a strong name. But listen, Elliot, I've loved you having on the show. I think I'm glad we finally got it in the diary and it's finally happened. So thank you so much for that. I'm super grateful for your time.
oh, it's been a massive pleasure. I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone else for listening and watching. This has been Founders 365.